Drug development is becoming more expensive and more risky, and so getting your data and decisions right first time is becoming more valuable. This presentation describes the crucial contribution that statistical insight makes to getting it right first time. Before we launch into the main content, I want to describe the organisation and the motives behind this presentation and introduce our speakers. My name is Robert Cuff. I work at ViiV Healthcare and I'm a former chair of statisticians in the pharmaceutical industry. PSI is a professional body for statisticians working in pharma, and we've been promoting statistical insight in healthcare for just under 40 years. In response to a challenge from statisticians working at the UK regulatory agency to improve the rigour of licensing submissions, we've put together this presentation, which aims to describe the impact of quality statistical insight to drug development and where to find that insight. Our speakers are Genevieve Wills of University College London and Dawn Midwinter of GlaxoSmithKline. Both have extensive experience in industry and are also drawing on the collective experience of our membership to provide examples of development programs in which statistical insight had a significant impact. And so without further ado, I'll hand over to Dawn to explain how we plan to describe that impact.
In terms of what we hope we can achieve today, there are three broad themes. The first is awareness of the added value of experienced statistical input throughout the drug development process. Often the statistician is called late in the day in the hope of salvaging data analysis in a study that didn't go as was hoped, but not infrequently the design is unfortunately flawed so that it is often sadly too late for the statistician to make a real impact. Earlier statistical input can make all the difference. The second is the time and cost efficiency benefits that can flow from statistical input, especially input into trial design as well as input into analysis. And the third is that statistical input is not only about p-values. Experienced statistical input can positively impact overall strategy and critical decision making. As you will be acutely aware, drug and device development is high risk and very expensive. Clinical trials cost between $5,000 and $40,000 per patient, and to bring a drug right the way through to the market is estimated to cost between $0.8 to $2 billion. Making the most of your data and dollars, minimizing risk and making the best possible decisions is therefore clearly critical. PSI believe that experienced statistical input can help you in this regard. Unfortunately, failure rates in both Phase 2 and Phase 3 trials remain high for both large and small companies alike. Failure rates of 80% in Phase 2 and 50% in Phase 3 have recently been reported. 2/3 of Phase 3 failures were due to not showing a positive treatment effect, which, it has been speculated, may reflect on the quality of Phase 2 design and analysis. This is perhaps of some concern given the sound principles outlined in ICH E9, Statistical Principles for Clinical Trials, which are intended to guide the sponsor toward good trial design and data analysis. In terms of the presentation, from here, Jenna will first cover the value of statistical input into trial design. Dawn will then talk about data analysis and interpretation, and Jenna will finish by making comment regarding strategic statistical input across the full breadth of development, illustrating each of these topics with real examples where experienced statistical input has made a real and important contribution to the sponsor and their success. I will now pass over to Jenna for the next part of the presentation.
So let's start with trial designs that can do more. I'm going to share with you some real-life examples relating to Phase 2 and Phase 3 designs. Traditional trial designs are most likely familiar to you all. Here, the statistician helps by looking at the critical elements of a given design and works with the sponsor to help ensure appropriate powering and efficiency in terms of subject numbers. Beyond this, the statistician can offer more sophisticated design elements, such as early curtailment for futility, potentially saving the sponsor from unnecessary expense, or early stopping for outstanding results. In either case, special attention must be paid to exactly how this is done, since, if not done properly and without due care in terms of the biases and increased regulatory risk that can be introduced, such manoeuvres can undermine a trial and seriously damage its regulatory value. This is where the input of an experienced statistician is absolutely critical. Other features of trial designs that might be considered are adaptations. These include dropping a dose midway through the trial, midstream resizing to help boost the chances of success, or restricting future subject accrual to a specific subject of patients who appear to benefit the most. All of these kinds of innovative designs offer greater flexibility to the sponsor, but, as captured in guidance from the EMA and FDA, these designs also come with increased risk and a possibility of bias. An experienced statistician is therefore very important to help the sponsor safely navigate the complexities and take proper advantage of what these designs can offer. So let's look at some real examples. Here is one where the statistician suggested combining Phase 2 and Phase 3 in a CNS setting where the endpoint was relatively short-term, therefore supporting a flexible, adaptive design approach. A design was proposed and accepted, where 3 doses and a placebo arm were assessed first, an interim performed, and the best performing dose and placebo carried forward into a confirmatory assessment phase. With careful design and many simulations, the design was shown to control the chance of a false efficacy finding, which is a key concern for regulators, and was accepted by the FDA. The cost saving to the sponsor were estimated to be approximately $12 million. Here is another example where a sponsor was initially advised by a non-industry experienced statistician that a Phase 2 trial in an intensive case setting would take around 340 patients. An experienced pharma statistician took a second look and redirected the design away from p-values and towards decision-making, which is what both the sponsor and the venture capitalist funding the development actually wanted to do. In the end, several design options were proposed by the pharma statistician. These options reduced the overall size of the trial to a more feasible and manageable cost, while allowing for an interim go, no-go decision point. The final chosen design only required 120 patients, with an interim look after half the patients were completed, and gave the following decision tree. This was accepted as the final design by the sponsor and supported by the venture capitalists providing the funding. Here is another example of a flexible design where initially there is proof of concept followed by a second phase that expanded the dose range to fully evaluate the dose-response relationship. This design combined several innovative features to obtain maximum of information in what was an early stage of development with a substantial a priori uncertainty. First, the placebo arm was augmented with historical information for the proof of concept decision part. Second, after declaring positive proof of concept, the trial was extended into a dose-ranging phase where additional doses and the proportional allocation of subjects to these doses were optimally chosen in light of the Stage 1 data. In the final analysis, the dose-response analysis included all the randomized data from both study parts to provide the best overall estimate possible. Other options for trial designs are building in early stopping for success or failure. Here is the example of a design where we have early stopping for success of letrozole in early breast cancer. 2 interim analyses were pre-planned and the study stopped early due to the results crossing the defined statistical threshold. Such designs offer the opportunity to obtain positive results sooner and make new medicines available to patients and physicians earlier than might otherwise have been expected. And this example demonstrates a design that stopped early for lack of efficacy. The trial was powered to observe 72 new infections in 3,900 women, followed for 1 year. An interim was planned for the IDMC to evaluate the data after half of the patients had been entered. When they did this, there were 56 infections in the data, 28 on the drug and 28 on the control. The IDMC recommended stopping the trial due to a low probability of observing a positive benefit from the drug. Such fertility designs and decision rules can be provided by an experienced statistician and so help you financially de-risk your development programs. In summary, clever designs are possible but statistically complicated. The statistician can work with your team to develop a decision grid of possible outcomes and the associated probability of making the correct next development decision. The designs would need to be carefully evaluated and the benefits and risks weighed in terms of the extra complexity and potential for regulatory concern, particularly with stage designs that require interim analyses that may be unblinded to the sponsor. I'm now going to hand back to Dawn, who will talk about the data analysis.
Next, I'd like to talk about data analysis and how an experienced statistician can help you make the most of your data. This example of data analysis involves a trial in hereditary angioedema, HAE for short. This is a rare disease which allows the sponsor to apply for orphan drug status and scientific advice in the form of protocol assistance. Here, it was the statistician at the regulatory authority who suggested an alternative analysis to that which had been submitted by the sponsor. In the two Phase 3 studies, named FAST-1 and FAST-2, response was defined as a reduction from baseline in visual analog symptom score of more than 20 points for a mild attack and 30 points for a severe attack. Time to onset of symptom relief was the primary endpoint used by the sponsor. The figures presented here show the time to onset of symptom relief of the experimental drug versus the comparator for each of the studies. The bottom figure shows that Firazyr beat the existing unlicensed treatment with a statistically significant result. However, the top figure shows a non-significant result when comparing with placebo. You can also see that the placebo response here is better than the existing unlicensed treatment, but remember this is from two different trials. Upon review of the data, the CHMP statistician suggested to examine a different endpoint, being the change in VAS from baseline to 4 and 12 hours post-dose. The rationale was that use of the continuous response would be more powerful than the binary classification that underpins a time-to-event analysis. These figures are showing the VAS score plotted against time for both the studies. As you can see from both figures, using this new endpoint, Firazyr showed a significant improvement in both trials. This analysis was considered the most clinically relevant way of analysing the data because it used the actual VAS scores without an artificial binary construct as specified by the study protocols. Subsequently, Firazyr was approved and designated an orphan medicine. Another example of when statistical input and analysis salvaged an otherwise likely unapprovable situation relates to the so-called PLATO trial. This was a large randomized double-blind trial in over 18,000 patients with acute coronary syndromes, for example heart attacks and strokes. The overall result was positive, but a pre-planned analysis by region, shown on the table here, suggested results were reversed in the North American region. The forest plot to the right of the table gives a graphical view of the hazard ratios and confidence intervals for each of the region. Further investigation for the US alone gave a similar result for the 1,450 US patients. The FDA were very uncomfortable with this result, referring to it as the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The approval of the study was on the line, and it fell to the statistician to find and lead a path through the issue. This involved extensive innovative data analysis and close collaboration with the FDA. The figure presented here shows the statistical analysis of the data examining various factors and their impact on the regions. This extensive analysis showed that the amount of concomitant aspirin was the likely underlying cause driving the negative results in the US. It was found that, regardless of region, the efficacy of the drug was very dependent on aspirin dose. The higher the aspirin dose, the less the efficacy of the drug. And since aspirin dose was much higher on average in the US than the rest of the world, this served to explain in large part the results seen in the US. In the end, more than 8,000 supportive analyses were conducted, compiled and interpreted by the statistical team in response to an action letter from the FDA. These analyses were submitted, and the FDA, in their publicly available review of the data, revealed that the analyses were pivotal in their eventual decision to license the drug in the US in July 2010. Jenna will now talk to you about other ways to benefit.
In addition to the classic areas of design and analysis, experienced statisticians can help in other critical areas of the development process too. For example, experienced pharma statisticians are often involved as key members not only of the clinical team, but also the wider multidisciplinary development team, and so are frequently key partners along with medical, regulatory and marketing colleagues in critical development decision-making. As well as guidance and input on matters relating to the size, design, number of clinical trials and other real-world studies, the statistician can give key support to business-critical decision-making regarding progression or not through the stages of development. For example, innovative Bayesian methodologies can be used to provide a predictive probability of success in Phase 3, given the data actually observed in Phase 2. While no one can guarantee a positive outcome, in light of the continuing high failure rate in late-stage development, such methodologies can help you to make the best decisions possible based on your data, helping to at least increase the chance of success and avoid exposing large numbers of patients to potentially ineffective therapies. If you are a small company with an exit strategy whereby the aim is to strike a deal with a large pharma, either to co-develop or in-license your drug, then it is in your interest to ensure that the trials you are undertaking and the analyses that you are planning to support such a deal with are sound and statistically rigorous. In considering the value of a potential asset, nearly all large pharmaceutical companies will involve a statistician in the due diligence process to thoroughly review trial design, data analysis, and interpretation. It doesn't matter if you are a small company or a large company. Statisticians all talk the same language when it comes to the strengths and weaknesses of trial design, conduct, and analysis. Key questions asked during due diligence activities will cover statistical methodology, consistency of data and results, integrity of the data, and the planning of the study. Your data will be examined in two directions. Backwards, what evidence exists to support the product's efficacy and safety profile, and forwards, regarding what further development will be needed to demonstrate the product's efficacy and safety. An experienced statistician working with you prior to and during a due diligence process can help you to prepare for what is to come and also help to demonstrate the statistical veracity of your data and design. In this way, the statistician can work with you to help increase the chances of securing a successful outcome in the due diligence process. In addition to development strategy and crucial activities like due diligence, an experienced pharma statistician can help you and your business in many other ways, some of which are highlighted on this slide. Currently, we are undergoing something of a revolution in terms of data access and transparency. This may offer new opportunities to explore and evaluate critical trial data that otherwise would only ever have been seen in publications. Statisticians can obviously support you in the secondary analysis of such data. Finally, statisticians are increasingly involved in health economic data evaluation, such as cost-effectiveness analysis, survival modelling, and network meta-analysis. This area is becoming increasingly important with market access, pricing and reimbursement being governed by the likes of NICE in the UK. I will now hand back to Dawn for the conclusions.
In summary, I hope we have provided a convincing case with respect to the benefit that experienced pharma statistical expertise and input can bring to you, your organisation and your development programmes. Statisticians offer a set of unique strategic and analytical skills which can be used to enrich all stages of your drug development program. Statisticians can partner with you to help shape efficient development programs and help you to successfully navigate dialogue with regulatory agencies regarding trial design and data analysis. Statisticians can also offer a wide variety of innovative design options to enable you to consider both classic and new designs and make the best possible decisions throughout the development process at the right time and at the right cost. Experienced pharma statistical expertise can enhance and enrich your drug development efforts. There are a number of ways to find that expertise. You can work with independent standalone contractors. These individuals are often very highly experienced and can be contacted directly. You could also consider using an established contract research organisation, also known as a CRO for short, who have a range of statistical experience and resources that may suit your particular needs. There are websites listing statistical consultants, for example, the Royal Statistical Society's website. The PSI website has a page dedicated to pharma-specific statistical support and expertise, which provides detailed resources, contractors and CROs. And here are just some references you might find helpful that relate to the examples we have shared with you today. And with that, I would like to thank you all for your time and attention today and bring our presentation to a close.